My name is Edith Crane. I was born in 1846 in a town called Herkimer in upstate New York, on a farm that my father worked until his back gave out and his pride gave out shortly after. I am 91 years old. I have buried a husband, 2 children, 3 siblings, and more neighbors than I can count on both hands. I have outlived almost everyone who ever knew me when I was young. And I want you to understand what that means before I say another word. It means there is no one left to correct me. It means I have had 60 years to think about the things I did wrong, and no one left alive to argue with me about them. That is not a comfort. That is a sentence. So when I tell you what I am about to tell you, I need you to hear it the way I could not hear it when I was your age. Not as a story, not as something that happened to some old woman a long time ago. As a warning. As something that is already happening to you right now, today, and you do not see it yet. I did not attend my own mother's funeral. It was the winter of 1872. I was 26 years old. My mother died on a Tuesday in February, when the snow was thick on the ground and the roads between our farm and the town church were hard with ice. The whole of Herkimer turned out for her. My father was there, my brothers were there, my sister Margaret was there. Half the county came, because my mother had been a woman people respected. They respected her discipline. They respected her silences. They respected the way she ran a household and a family and a farm with nothing soft about her, nothing yielding, nothing that could be mistaken for weakness. I did not go. I told myself I could not make the journey. The roads, the cold, my youngest was sick. There were 100 reasons I gave myself and gave to others, and every single one of them was a lie I told, so I would not have to say the true thing, which was this. I did not go because I was angry, and I believed that anger was the same as justice. I was wrong. I was 26 years old, and I was wrong, and I have been paying for it for 65 years. Let me tell you about my mother, so you understand what I am saying. She was not a cruel woman. I want to be careful here, because the older I get, the more I understand that cruelty and coldness are not the same thing, even when they feel the same to the child receiving them. My mother was cold. She was distant. She was a woman who had been raised in a household where tenderness was considered a kind of weakness, and she carried that into our home and passed it down to us the way you pass down a piece of land or a family debt. Without much thinking about it, without understanding that it was hers to break. She ran our household like it was a thing to be managed. She woke before the sun. She worked until dark. She fed us, clothed us, kept the house, helped with the animals, helped with the harvest, bore 5 children, buried one of them before he was 2 years old. And she did all of it without complaint and without softness. That was her version of love. I understand that now. I did not understand it then. What I understood then was that she never held me when I was frightened, never praised me when I did well, never said the words I needed to hear. When I made a mistake, she did not raise her voice. She went quiet. That silence could last for days. It lived in the house like a cold wind that came through every crack in the walls, and you could not get warm against it no matter what you did. So by the time I was grown, I had built something inside myself to protect against that silence, a wall of my own, a decision that said, if she will not come to me, I will not go to her. If she will not soften, neither will I. If she is proud, I will be prouder. If she can endure without breaking, so can I. I told myself this was strength. I want you to hear me when I say this. I told myself this was strength. It was not strength. It was distance wearing the clothes of strength, and I did not know the difference until it was far too late for the knowing to do me any good. You are doing this right now, some of you. You know who you are. There is someone in your life, a mother, a father, a sister, a child you have stopped calling, and you have pulled back from them, and you have called it strength or dignity or self-preservation, and you have built a wall and called it a boundary, and you live behind that wall, and you tell yourself you are better for it. I thought that too. I was wrong. The wall does not protect you. The wall just makes you alone on both sides of it. My mother and I had not spoken warmly in years before she died. We saw each other at the farm for holidays and harvests and the necessary business of family. We were polite. We were civil. We did not fight. We did not argue. What we did was something worse than fighting. We existed alongside each other at a distance that we had both agreed to maintain, a distance that neither of us was willing to close, and we called that distance peace. It was not peace. It was two proud people choosing not to bleed in front of each other. When word came that she had fallen ill in January of that year, I went to see her. Once. I sat at the edge of her bed in the room where I had been born, and she lay there looking smaller than I had ever seen her look, and I did not know what to say. I do not know what I had expected. I think some part of me had expected that the nearness of death would change things between us, that she would reach for me the way she never had, that she would say the words she had never said, that dying would finally make her soft. She did not reach for me. She thanked me for coming. She asked about my children. She said she was not afraid. She fell asleep while I was still sitting there. I left before she woke. And 3 weeks later she was gone, and I did not go to her funeral. And I have spent 65 years trying to explain to myself why I did not go. And here is what I have come to after all that time. There is no explanation. There is only the choice I made, and the life I built on top of it, and the weight of that choice pressing down on everything that came after. You think there will be time to fix it. Whatever it is that is broken in your family, whatever silence is sitting between you and the person you cannot reach, you think there will be time. You think the moment will come when it becomes easier to close the distance, when the anger fades a little, when the hurt is old enough that you can stand to look at it without flinching, when one of you finally moves. I thought that too. My mother was 54 years old when she died. 54. I thought she would live much longer. Everyone did. She was hard and strong, and she had endured things that would have broken other women, and I believed, not in words, not consciously, but in some place in my body that did not think in words, I believed that hardness would protect her, that she would outlast everything, the way she had always seemed to outlast everything. She did not. She got sick in January, and she was gone by February, and I had no more time. You do not know how much time you have. You think you do. You are certain you do. You have a picture in your mind of the future, of the conversation you will eventually have, of the phone call or the visit or the letter you will eventually send. And that picture feels so real to you that it is almost as good as doing it. It is not. It is nothing. It is a story you are telling yourself so you can keep sitting behind your wall and still sleep at night. The conversation you are putting off may never happen. I am telling you this because I know it as well as I know anything. I have earned the right to say it plainly. My marriage was difficult in ways that took me years to see clearly. I married James Crane in 1869, 3 years before my mother died. He was a farmer and a decent man, not a cruel man, not a violent man. He worked hard, and he provided, and he was faithful, and he came home every night. And I want to be careful here too, because I know what it sounds like when a woman says her marriage was difficult, and I want to be precise about what I mean. What I mean is this. I brought the wall into my marriage. What I had learned from my mother, distance as dignity, silence as endurance, pride as the closest thing to self-protection, I brought all of it into the house I built with James. When he angered me, I went quiet. When I was hurt, I endured without saying so. When I needed something, I waited in silence for him to notice. And when he did not notice, because he was a man and he was not trained to notice, and the world we lived in did not require him to notice, I added that to the account of wrongs I was keeping. We never fought badly. We were never cold to each other the way my mother had been cold to me. But there was a degree of closeness that we never reached, and I knew it, and I think he knew it, and neither of us could find the way through to the other side of it. He died in 1908. We had been married 39 years. In the last year of his life, when he was sick and the children were grown and gone, we sat together in the evenings, and sometimes I would look at him and feel the weight of everything we had not said, and I would want to say it, and I would not know how. The habit of silence was too old by then. The distance was too practiced. He died not knowing the full depth of what I felt for him, because I had never told him clearly. Because I was my mother's daughter, and I had learned that love is not spoken, it is endured, it is maintained. It is kept alive through labour and presence and the refusal to leave, but it is not said. James died not knowing, and I knew that I had done that to us. I had chosen the wall over and over again across 39 years, and it had cost us a closeness that we could have had. I am not asking you to feel sorry for me. I am asking you to look at your own life. You are doing this, some version of this. You are keeping something back from someone who loves you, and you are calling it protection or dignity or the way you are. And in 30 years you will sit in a chair the way I am sitting in this chair, and you will understand what it cost you, and the understanding will be too late to do anything with. The hardest thing I have ever had to admit, and I have had to admit a great many hard things over 91 years, is this. I did not know how to love openly. I had never been shown. And instead of learning, I repeated. Instead of breaking the pattern, I handed it down. I had 4 children. 2 of them died before they were grown. Ruth in 1878, when she was 6 years old, from a fever that came on fast and did not go slowly. Thomas in 1891, 20 years old, thrown from a horse on a road not 5 miles from where he was born. Those deaths taught me things that I cannot put into simple words. I will try. When Ruth died, I understood for the first time that love is not something you can defer. I had loved her fiercely, the way mothers love children. I had held her. I had spoken to her. I had told her she was good and that I was glad she was mine. I had done with Ruth what I could not do with my mother, what I could not quite do with James. I had said the things out loud. And when she died, I was destroyed, the way any mother is destroyed. But I was not left carrying the weight of what I never said, because I had said it. Thomas was different. Thomas was 20 when he died. In his last years, He and I had fallen into a small silence of our own. Nothing serious, nothing irreconcilable. The normal distance between a grown son and a mother. The pulling away that young men do when they are becoming themselves. I had given him space because I thought that was what he wanted. I had not reached across the distance because I did not want to embarrass him or myself. I had waited for him to come back around when he was ready. He was not ready. He was thrown from that horse before he was ready, and I never got to close the small distance that had opened up between us. And that small distance became the same kind of wound that the large distance with my mother had been. Because it does not matter how big the gap is. What matters is whether it was closed before the chance was gone. Here is what I know now, after 91 years of living. Pride will make you lonely, and it will call it dignity. And you will not know the difference until you are very old and very alone, and there is no one left to be proud in front of. Distance feels like safety when you are young. It feels like you are protecting something important, some core of yourself that cannot be touched, some essential piece that you are keeping safe from the people who might hurt it. I understand that feeling. I lived inside it for most of my life. But here is the truth about that distance. It does not protect you. It empties you. Slowly, over years, it empties out everything that might have been warmth or closeness or the particular comfort of being truly known by another person, and it leaves you with a self that is intact and untouched and utterly alone. You think you have time to close the distance. You do not. You think the other person knows how you feel without you saying it. They do not. Or if they know it, they feel the absence of it spoken the way you feel the absence of summer in February. They know it is there somewhere. They cannot feel it. And the longer you keep it unspoken, the less it reaches them. And eventually they stop waiting for it, and they arrange their life around the cold fact that it is not coming. My mother arranged her life around that fact long before she died. And I had spent years believing that the coldness was hers, that she was the one withholding, that I was the one waiting and hurting and deserving. It was not until I was in my 40s that I could finally look at it clearly enough to see the other side. To see that I had withheld just as much as she had. That my pride had matched her pride. That the distance between us had been built by both of us, each standing on our own side and refusing to walk toward the other, and each believing the other was the one who should walk first. Neither of us walked first, and she died, and I did not go to her funeral, and the chance was gone. I want to say something about that funeral, because I think it matters. I did not go because I told myself there was nothing to grieve. I told myself that grief required love, and that love required warmth, and that warmth had never existed between us. And therefore I had nothing to mourn. I told myself that attending would be a performance, a lie, and that I was too honest for it. I told myself that her death did not touch me, that I had already mourned the mother I never had years before she died, and that standing beside her grave in the February snow would be an act of hypocrisy. Every single one of those things was a lie, I told myself, so I would not have to feel what I was actually feeling, which was grief. Raw, complicated, inconvenient grief. Not the clean grief of losing a loving mother. The harder grief of losing the possibility of ever having one. The grief of a door closing that I had pretended was already closed. The grief of finality arriving before resolution. I was not strong enough to feel that grief. I was 26 years old, and I was not strong enough for it. And so I dressed it up in righteousness and called it a decision, and stayed home. I have been living inside that decision for 65 years. Here is what I need you to understand. The absence does not erase the bond. You can distance yourself from a parent or a sibling or a child. You can stop calling. You can stop writing. You can cross a street to avoid them. You can tell yourself they do not matter, that you have moved past them, that the relationship is finished. You can do all of this, and the bond will remain. Not because it is sacred or mystical or some force beyond your understanding, but because the people who formed you cannot be unformed from you. Your mother's silences live in your silences. Your father's anger or tenderness or distance lives in the way you hold yourself when you are afraid. The patterns passed to you are inside you, regardless of how far you walk from the people who passed them. You do not escape the people who made you by leaving them. You carry them. And when they die without resolution, you carry both the person and the wound, together, for the rest of your life. That is what I have carried for 65 years. My mother's coldness and my own pride, together, inseparable, locked into a weight I cannot put down because there is nowhere left to put it. The person who could have released me from it is buried in a churchyard in Herkimer, under a stone that says simply, Harriet Morse, 1818 to 1872, beloved. Beloved. That word has stood over her grave for 60 years, and I have stood far from it, and I have thought about that word, and I have thought about whether it was true, and whether love can be real when it is never expressed, and whether a woman can be beloved by a daughter who did not attend her funeral. I do not have a clean answer to that. I do not think there is one. What I have is the truth of what I chose, and the weight of what it cost me, and the 65 years of living I did with that weight on my back. I want to talk to you now about the years after. Because it was not one wound and then nothing. The distance I had learned became the pattern of my life, and the consequences kept arriving, slowly, in ways that I did not always recognize as consequences. That is the particular cruelty of the mistakes that matter. They do not always announce themselves. They seep in. They show up later in different shapes. They appear in your marriage and your children and your old age, and you do not always connect them to their source, to the original decision, to the first time you chose the wall. I grew older. My children grew and left. My husband died. My sister Margaret moved away to Ohio with her husband in the early 1880s, and we wrote letters for a while, and then the letters slowed, and then they stopped. The way letters do when there is no emergency to write about, and no habit of closeness to sustain them. Margaret died in 1919. I received a letter from her daughter. I did not go to Ohio for the funeral. I want you to mark that. I did not go to my sister's funeral either. Not for the same reasons I did not go to my mother's funeral. Margaret and I had been close as girls. I loved her. But I had let the distance grow because I was used to letting distance grow, because distance was the habit of my life, because I had learned in the years after my mother's death that the way to avoid grief was to maintain separation, to keep the bonds loose enough that when death came, and death always came, it would not pull you apart. It did not work. It never works. When Margaret died, I felt the separation the same way I had felt it when my mother died, except sharper, because this time I could not tell myself that the bond had never been warm. I knew Margaret. I had loved her clearly, and I had let the distance grow anyway, out of habit, out of the belief that the maintenance of closeness cost more than I was willing to pay. That is another thing I need you to hear. Closeness requires maintenance. It requires reaching. It requires writing the letter even when there is no emergency. It requires visiting even when the journey is long and inconvenient. It requires saying the words even when the words are difficult. Closeness does not maintain itself. It requires effort, regular, undramatic, often inconvenient effort. And if you stop making that effort, the closeness fades. And eventually, what you have is the shadow of what you had, and you call that shadow a relationship. And then one day the person dies, and you realize you had let them go years before they were actually gone. I let Margaret go years before she died. I let James go in 100 small ways across our 39 years together. I let Thomas go in the last years before the horse threw him. I let my mother go long before February of 1872, and then I confirmed it with the decision I made that winter. What I have come to understand, finally, too late, is that every one of those lettings go was a choice. It did not feel like a choice. It felt like the natural settling of things, the inevitable cooling that happens between people when life is busy and hard and full of its own demands. But it was a choice, chosen repeatedly, in small moments. Every time I did not write the letter, every time I did not make the journey, every time I kept the words back, every time I let the silence stand another day. You are making those choices now. I want you to understand that the choices you are making right now, the small daily choices about who you reach toward and who you allow to drift, those choices are building the old age you are going to live. The loneliness or the warmth of your last years is being constructed right now, today, in the way you treat the people who are still alive and still available to you. I did not know that when I was young. I thought the shape of my old age would be determined by large, dramatic events, by the big choices, by the things I did when everything was clearly at stake. I did not know that it would be determined by the small ones, by whether I wrote the letter, by whether I made the journey, by whether I said the thing out loud or kept it back one more day. The small choices are the ones that matter, the ones that seem easy to defer, the ones that can always wait until tomorrow. My mother died on a Tuesday in February, and I had one visit left, and I used it to sit at the edge of her bed and leave before she woke up. That was my last chance. That was all I got. One visit. One chance to say anything real. And I sat at the edge of the bed, and I did not say anything real. And then I left. I have thought about what I would say to her now. I have had 65 years to compose it. I know exactly what I would say. I would say that I understood her better than I had admitted. I would say that her coldness had hurt me, and that I believed she had not known how to be otherwise, and that I did not hold it against her any more. I would say that I had repeated her pattern in my own life, and that I was sorry for it. I would say that I loved her in the way that children love parents who have not been easy to love, incompletely, confusedly, beneath layers of hurt, but genuinely. I would say that I wished we had found each other before it was too late. I know what I would say. I have known it for decades, and I will never say it. That is the permanent cost of what I chose. Not guilt, not punishment, just the permanent inability to say the thing that should have been said. The door closed in February of 1872, and it has never opened again, and it will not open.